Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we got a lot to talk about. First and foremost, let's talk about the indictment of former President Donald Trump. We got a whole lot of ground to cover as the president will be has made his way into the courtroom. We'll give you the details and talk about the number of dynamic issues that are at play here. So we'll go into that conversation with my brother, Dr. Cleo Manango. Also, we're going to be checking in with Dr. Gerald Horn later on to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. 55 years ago today, Dr. King was assassinated on that balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. We want to talk about his vision for America. Where are we now, and how much we still have to go to get to that new place? We'll have that conversation. So a lot of big discussions, so stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of Culture here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Woo! All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. We got so much ground to cover for today's big story, which is the indictment of former President Donald Trump. As we know, the president has been called in by the Manhattan District Attorney, the DA Alvin Bragg, who has called on the president and has charged the president for a number of charges, a lot of them stemming from his business operation. But then there's also that big charge of him paying that hush money to porn star Stormy Daniels, that $130,000 that he was able to, that Trump sent to his lawyer at the time, Michael Cohen, to pay the porn star about their sexual encounter. And so that is part of the central process. That is the central piece of this large indictment. There have been 34 counts, folks, 34 counts or 34 charges against the former president. And this is a historic day in that no president of the United States has ever been charged or indicted before. So there are a lot of big pieces to this conversation. We're certainly going to open up the chat for you to join us in the discussion. We are streaming live on Black Star Network on Amazon News. But if you want to join the chat, make sure you do so through Facebook and YouTube. And let's have the conversation. I'm going to bring in my brother, Dr. Cleo Manango, who is of the Black Men Exchange. You've seen him on RMU, Roland Martin Unfiltered. And so we are happy to have him bringing his insight and expertise to the conversation here on The Culture. Dr. Cleo, good to talk to you, brother. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well, man, and I haven't had a chance to tell you this yet, but congratulations on your show.
I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
It's Monago.
Monago, thank you so much, brother. Please correct me, man. Please correct me. I could definitely be corrected. Yeah, brother. I understand how people mispronounce names, so definitely. But brother yes. Cleo, I appreciate you for taking time out to talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing, and more importantly, what the impact of this whole situation is with the former president. We're expected, and folks, I'm gonna just let y'all know, because there's so many moving pieces to this conversation, to the story, we were going to try to bring you some stills. We're going to try to bring you some video footage. It's because we want to make sure that you stay as much in tune about what's happening in New York City right now as possible. But brother Cleo, let's start the conversation off right here, brother, talking about first looking at this whole indictment. I remember reading a story about the exonerated five, those brothers who were freed after it showed they're formerly known as the Central Park Five, but the exonerated five had been freed, and now they have moved on, done some great work. But one of the exonerated five, Dr. Yusef Salaam, he had, when it was asked just a couple of days ago what he thought about President Trump's indictment, he was saying simply karma. And this seems to be the sentiment of a lot of Black leaders that are looking at this situation and how it plays out. How do you see the situation as a Black man in the space that you're in, knowing the history of Donald Trump, knowing about the policies of Donald Trump? Would you agree with Dr. Youssef in saying it's karma?
No, I don't agree with the concept of karma. We can get into that later. I don't believe that's real. But I will say that this is not the first time that Trump has been in this courtroom. In the 70s, he and his father both were in the same courtroom when he was accused of racism because he wouldn't rent any of his buildings to Black people. And there was a dissent decree that came out of that particular event. So he's been to this court before, but it's been a long time. I have had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people about this. And there's people in the community, brothers in the community and sisters. And there's a very interesting mixed perspective, believe it or not. And I'll start with this. Some people, Black men, look at Trump from a sympathetic eye. They look at Trump who's in court, who's being arrested, as you may remember or may have read, during his election, there was an increase among Black men previous to the other years the previous year who voted and supported him. Now, a lot of us don't know our history. I don't know if that's your experience, but a lot of us don't know our history, and we don't really know how to reflect back to some relevant issues like him being in court for racism toward African Americans in terms of his property. But it's a mixed bag. There's people who are glad about it. There's some people who say it don't matter. That some people have literally said a racist white system has decided to allow a racist white person to be arrested and indicted. What does that mean? And of course, they're pandering the guy, the district attorney who's Black, who set up this case. But it's a mixed bag. I think that a lot of African Americans still feel like, what difference does it make? Even in the shadow of Biden, looking at the whole political system, a lot of us are wondering, what difference does it make? And it's also, some people do not believe for a minute that he will be put in prison or get any of those ultimate charges and punishments that come with people sometime when they go to court like this. So I've heard things all over the spectrum.
And can you? And I've heard the same thing, dear brother. And I think it's interesting, not just as a young Black man, but as a Black man who is politically active and politically aware, to hear other Black men in particular talking about the president. One of the angles, one of the things I've heard that attracted Black men to Donald Trump is the fact of this view of his masculinity, that he is a masculine man. He's a manly man. So you're laughing because you must have heard the same thing too.
Yeah, I've heard that. It has not been a dominant theme, but I've heard that. What I've heard is that they feel like the Democratic. I've heard two things. One that you might find particularly intriguing. I heard that they don't find the Democratic Party a supporter, a defender, or a group that affirms Black men. So they don't look at the Republican Party as such a foe, because they don't look at the Democratic Party as such a friend. Also, I've heard brothers say, Black ain't working no more. I need some money. The Black perspective, the Black narrative, the Black focus. The cops are still killing us. The statistics are high in terms of casualties that Black men experience. Morbidity and mortality rates have not lowered under any of these people, including Democrats. So now, instead of focusing on Black issues, a lot of Black people are focusing on economics and money issues, and they see Trump as the poster child for such a phenomenon.
Right. I would agree. I've had conversations about the same thing. Well, he's a billionaire. He's a money man. He's a businessman, so he should know what to do. And I think it's very, very interesting that is a part of, I call it like a la carte politics, where we don't want to take the whole person. We want to take part of the person. We want to take part of their message and then just run with it, instead of having some real conversations about the larger issues, whether it's character issues on a personal front, or whether it's about his ability and eligibility and his qualifications to do the job on a professional front. So I think there are a number of things at play there, and I've definitely heard that. you know, one of the things that I saw that came up in this whole process, Brother Cleo, is the fact that he is still eligible for office. That according to, and I want to throw this up there very quickly, Keena, let's go to that quote about the constitutional law experts. They have pointed out that the only requirement for a presidential candidate are they be at least 35 years old, born in the United States, or have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. That's it. So when we're talking about, say it again, brother.
Not only is he still eligible, he's still the highest ranking Republican person running on that ticket for president.
Hey, look, Brother Cleo, we having we're going to have a 100 conversation today, bro. So I don't want you to hold nothing back from the culture today. I don't understand. As a matter of fact, it gets so crazy, and then we're going to have to take a quick pause, but it gets so crazy, dear brother, that his rivals in the campaign trail have actually decided to stand in solidarity with it. They have actually decided to close ranks and to support him and to denigrate, you know, the DA, Alvin Bragg, the system and the whole nine, and fall in lockstep with the messaging that this is political persecution. Please tell me, dear brother, please tell me, what the hell is going on with that? How does that happen?
Well, I hate to sound so simplistic, but to me, it's really simple. I remember I was on Roland's show back in the day when Trump was running for president. And I remember being on the show with Angela Rye and Lauren Victoria Burke and Roland, of course. And Trump had just given a speech. And they were saying how stupid the speech was and how ridiculous the speech was. And I said, without stuttering, the speech was brilliant. Now, it wasn't brilliant because it served me. It wasn't brilliant because it catered to me or cared about me. But as a mind, I'll use the word F, as a mind F or a mind twisting or manipulative approach to getting the votes, it was brilliant because he spoke to white folks who are anxious about the idea of them being supreme, being compromised. They were bothered on a fractured ego level by Barack Obama being the president with his black wife for 8 years, and the whole idea of white being superior and that whole delusion that some of them get up in the morning to greet themselves with because they need that because they're concerned about being mediocre and losing power. All they know is that Trump, unlike Clinton and other people, is very, very clear on who he's an advocate for. He does not mince words or play games or do some of the strategies that Biden does by hiring Kamala and all these other things he's doing, even though he has a past of racism as well and other issues. He ain't playing into those games. He's straight up. And that's what white supremacists and people who are into that so-called conservative lane want. Somebody who's, pardon this expression, unfiltered. And Trump is unfiltered. It doesn't matter how so-called ineligible or his lack of experience. That's irrelevant. They want somebody in the White House who's going to keep white power, the myth of their superiority and the grasp of power that they're trying desperately to keep intact. That's all that matters. And Trump is the only one who's being blatant about that. Everybody else is walking on eggshells. And what some people don't realize statistically, that if it wasn't for COVID-19 and the scary thing it did to the culture of this country, he would have won the presidency again. He would have won. He came close. And we keep on forgetting that. And even getting back to how serious white folks are, as you already know, most of the people that helped to get him in the White House were white women. So It didn't matter about him grabbing pussies and his Stormy Daniels. That's irrelevant. We want our boy in the White House because we want to sustain power as people identified as white in this republic. Now, there's people who are embarrassed. I'm talking about Republicans now, who are embarrassed or who are talking in public as if they don't support him or that they're on the fence. But most of them, including DeSantis, he being Trump, is still saying, I'm with him. Because DeSantis is a consistent, focused, white supremacist, anti-everybody, particularly black people, and he's not moving from that. And Trump is this ball.
Right. Dr. Cleo, I got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we'll have more conversation with you, dear brother. And of course, We're expected to get some feed from the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, the gentleman who is in charge of this investigation of the former president. He's going to be giving his remarks this afternoon as well. So stay with us. A lot to cover as we continue to talk about the indictment of Donald Trump here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape. With me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We have been checking in with my dear brother, Dr. Cleo Manago, to talk to us about what's going on with former President Donald Trump, as today was his indictment hearing. We just got word that that Trump has left the courtroom. Here's a couple of pictures of him right there, folks. He has left the courtroom. There's also going to be some remarks made by the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, who is in charge of this whole process, this investigation. And take a look at there, folks. You would never thought you would see a day where this man would be sitting in a courtroom, and today is the day we're looking at this. So this is a historic day, and as my brother Dr. Cleo made point of, this is not the first time that he's been in court. This isn't the first time. However, this is a historic time because of where we are in this country. And I'm going to ask my team just to keep me abreast as to the remarks being made by the district attorney, Mr. Alvin Bragg, as we continue to have this conversation. Folks, I want to hear from you, Culture Crew. I want to hear from you. So many people have been checking in. Big shout out to my online Culture Crew on YouTube and on Facebook. Love to hear the conversation. So we're going to just keep it going. But Corinna, I want to get your thoughts on, you shared your thoughts on this. You said, no question, Dr. Cleo, you are so right about that he would have won again had it not been for the pandemic. So it was a little bit of a situation, Dr. Cleo, was like the perfect storm for him to kind of lose control and then to get into the election, to lose the election in the way he did. And some people would say, thank God, and other people would say, oh no. Do we have to wait on a quote unquote disaster, a worldwide disaster to take this guy down in order for him to get out of power. And it seems so. Teflon Don continues to be the situation. I mean, you know it like I know it. This man has been hurling epithets from racial issues, from racial wording, language. He has used the whole gamut to stay in power and to uphold the idea and philosophy of white supremacy in this country. He has done it.
Not only that, during his campaign, Black men in a couple of places got beat up at his rallies. And so even though we call him Teflon Don, and I understand that markation, he has people, millions, who support him. He ain't by himself. He's lifted up by millions of people, and he has a huge multi-million number support system in this country. And he almost won because people voted for him, not simply because he ran his mouth and that was it. I think the country needs to understand where we live and the culture, if you will, that we exist within. We're in a situation right now where white people are concerned about their capacity to reproduce. And this is a statistical fact. There's parts of the country, like in the Midwest, where there's more deaths among white people than births. And they've been trying to find ways to reproduce in higher numbers for decades now. And people who are not white, Black, Latino, et cetera, particularly Latino, are growing in rapid numbers, and they're really concerned. So they need a lifeline, and they see Donald as a lifeline. Now, I think it's going to be difficult for Donald to win as president now, not because people don't support him completely, but if he becomes a felon, becomes criminalized in the literal sense by this indictment, even just like COVID-19 kicked his butt out of high voting rankings in this last presidential run, this could really hurt him. But I will reiterate that just because Trump is there or not, this culture of people within the United States of America support his sentiments and didn't get mad at him for Black men being attacked at his rallies, or for him grabbing pussies, or being a man who shows great disgust for women, for Black people. Like I said before, he was in the same court in the 70s when his father and him were both fined for racism and not allowing Black people to live on his property. This dude got issues, but they're not just his issues. The United States of America has issues, and he's the poster child.
So how do we attack that? Because over these past couple of days, Dr. Cleo, I've been having the conversation about the real threat to democracy doesn't come from across the waters. The real threat to democracy are the values of the American people, the voter values. That if voters in this country don't see the difference between right and wrong, if voters in this country don't value having a certain character while you're supposed to be representing and serving the masses for the greater good, then we got some real, fundamentally democracy, quote unquote, this experiment will not work. So now that you pointed those things out, it's like, how did we get to a place? Is that the responsibility of Black men and Black women in this country to serve as this consciousness? Or is that the responsibility to white America to wake up and say, you have produced Donald Trump. You're the reason that we're in this predicament. And at the end of the day, if you guys don't do something, then we will continue to go down to this destructive path.
Well, pardon me for being potentially cynical, but destructive is relative. From some people's perspective, Donald Trump is not destructive. He's a hero. Just like back in the day when they had Manifest Destiny, they were slaughtering people, or even in more contemporary terms, often when a cop murders an unarmed Black man, typically he's let off. The cop or she, right. In one instance that I know of, but there's been more than one instance that's on record. So we're talking about a mindset that makes me rarely talk about this thing called democracy, because the United States of America has been a whiteocracy for a long time. And it's never really been a democracy in terms of it representing the voices of the society, because we live in a society. And I've been here all my life, And the government, including Congress, no matter how many Democrats are there, rarely speak to issues that concern me, like reparations and like making sure that critical race theory or something similar are in schools, so people particularly Black people, can know history and have more of a critical analysis and unlearn what I call the white supremacy trauma trance and become awake Black people that live their lives not only independently and based on their own individual interests, but like all other groups do, work collectively to make sure that our people do well. This society has thrown a wrench, this democratic society has thrown a wrench in Black people building success. You know about Black Wall Street, and we can go on and on about times in this country where Black people showed our ingenuity and brilliance, but a lack of ability to understand the importance of defense, and that's a whole nother show.
Right.
But we need to understand, we need to stop talking about democracy, in my opinion, in the United States, in this Snow White, pun intended, in the Seven Dwarfs fiction fantasy land, because this society has never been a democracy. Talk to Native Americans, they'll tell you about democracy. But this is not an issue of whether Donald Trump is right or wrong. Of course, I see him as wrong. I imagine that you see him as wrong. But some people see him as right, which rhymes with white. Maybe it's a coincidence. But there's some people who see him as right, who support him, who sees him as effective, who see him as somebody who is important in this country for leadership and for keeping a certain legacy and thought form alive and sustaining white power. That's right for them. But one of your questions was, or among your questions is, well, what do Black people do? Well, that can be the most frustrating part of the conversation, because Black people have been needing to do what we need to do way a long time ago, but we're in what I call, and you've heard me mention before, policy, we're in a trance. We're in a unresolved, deep, white supremacy, anti-Black trauma trance that has most of our children to this day, from the late 30s to 2022, when the last doll test was done, choosing the white doll. Black people have work to do on getting Black people to love ourselves and our own image, have a critical analysis, and separate white myths from Black truths. Then we can be democratic, even independent in terms of building for ourselves. But this system and this society is never going to be affirming of us. The best thing we can do is make sure that we're involved in local politics and local voting to make sure that we're safe where we live. But on a macro level, we need to not wait for this system to come to our rescue. I'll close this particular rant with that. Natanji, who's on the Supreme Court, and Ms. Harris, who's the vice president, they have some things in common. They don't necessarily affirm Black people, which is why they are where they are. So we need to be strategic and vote. I'm not saying for a minute that we shouldn't vote. We should have an influence on what occurs, but not be dependent on it for our liberation. That's Black work. That's independent Black community work, family work, parent to child work, family and friends work. Once we get a clue and come out the trance, it's the trance that's messing us up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we got to take another quick pause. When we come forward, we'll continue our conversation with Dr. Cleo. I'm going to share some of your thoughts from the Online Culture Crew, and of course, keep you posted on what's going on in New York. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about the indictment of President Trump, former president of the United States, of Donald Trump, former president of the United States. Been checking in with my brother, Dr. Cleo Monango. But here are some photos. That's a little video of the president in the courtroom. And we were showing you some photos in Kingdom. We could post those photos again. Here's what it was looking like earlier today of the president. Again, this is at the New York City at the courtroom, at the courthouse. And security was tight, naturally. And here's the president inside of the courtroom, folks. He is sitting there. He was advised that he to not say a word, which he did not. He did not speak or he gave any statement or anything. 34 counts. 34 counts. Felony criminal charges of falsifying business records in Manhattan criminal court today. Now, here's the other thing, and then we're going to try to get some more. We're expected to hear from the district attorney, Mr. Alvin Bragg, shortly. But there are a number of things playing out, and I want to bring my brother, Dr. Cleo, back into this. One of the indictments, there was, Dr. Cleo, one of the things that now that this process, the court proceedings is over, all the charges have been revealed. One of the charges or the indictments against him alleges that the former president sought to undermine the integrity of the 2016 election, that he was a part of a quote unquote, and this is what comes from CNN, illegal conspiracy. So it's not just about the hush money. It's not just about falsifying business records. Now they're going also to his involvement with the 2016 election, which could speak to where we were last year with the January 6th committee and the whole nine. So this is broad. This is going. These are a broad set of charges from his personal conduct, business conduct, to his conduct while he was in office.
Well, again, this man has done horrible, disgusting things in our face ever since he's been in the public eye, particularly once he became president and as he ran for president. And I think that as long as he is focused and doesn't back down from his MAGA mantra, he still has the capacity to be considered legitimate and a force to be reckoned with in this country. He's expected to have these charges. No one knew exactly what they were going to be, but they knew they weren't going to be flattering, and they knew they were going to be something that was horrendous, that made him look bad if you take that information seriously. But I reiterate that this man has said, I mean, you remember when they had the Klan of, well, I forgot the name of the southern city now, but you probably remember where the Klan attacked people and somebody died, and he did not.
Charlottesville?
Yeah, he said that it was wrong on both sides. I mean,
right.
He's been atrocious. He's atrocious. However, he also brilliantly knows how to get into the mind of his constituency and make them feel like he said at his inauguration, he said something along the lines of, I'll never leave you alone, or I'll never leave you in a situation where you're vulnerable again. I mean, I'm paraphrasing him. He said something along those lines to those white folks that was at his inauguration. And they're not trying to win a beauty contest. They're not trying to win an integrity contest. That's not important to them. As a matter of fact, what some Republicans are going to do is find a way to publicly dance, some of them, publicly dance vocally as if they were, or rhetorically, I should say, as if they don't support him, and then go and support him. I mean, he just raised almost $8 million. And he raised that while indicted. So I'm not surprised at all about these charges, but I don't know how much difference it makes, because the man has been atrocious for the longest and doing well despite being atrocious.
Absolutely.
It took COVID-19 to knock him down, man. Maybe if COVID
Right. Hey, Dr. Cleo. I'm right there with you. It took COVID-19. It had a damn pandemic to take this man out.
Yeah.
That's real. That's real. And look, you know, we're getting information as we're talking about this whole situation. But one of the things is that you know, he got his foot soldiers on the ground. Protesters are there. There have been anti-Trump protesters and pro-Trump protesters right outside of the courthouse there in New York City. There has been some skirmishes, some altercations, some other issues. Here's the thing that took me over, though, Doc. Here's the thing that took me over, brother. The thing that took me over was Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of Congress's wildest. I don't even know how to describe this woman, but essentially, I just want to put that quote up there very quickly, because this is also what you're talking about in shaping the narrative and the conversation of how people see the situation. Keena, let's put that quote about President Trump being compared to the one and only Lord and Savior, Jesus. This is what Marjorie Taylor Greene said today at a rally before the hearing. President Trump is joining some of the most incredible people in history being arrested today. Nelson Mandela was arrested, served time in prison. Jesus was arrested and murdered by the Roman government.
And this is a member of Congress, right?
Marjorie Taylor Greene compared President Trump's plight to Jesus and Nelson Mandela.
And the central word.
This is, and brother Cleo, I want you to talk to us, just get your take on this very quickly, because this is a slap in the face against Nelson Mandela and the legacy that he had. This is slap up against against Jesus. Like, what is this level of manipulation? You talked about this earlier in your remarks. You talked about how President Trump often knows how to tap into his base. But now we're seeing that same type of, for lack of a better word, same type of skill being used by those who still support him, that they are trying to shape the narrative in such a way to attribute him to a place that he doesn't deserve to be. That is dangerous, especially in a very, very partisan time that we're living in this country.
Well, like I said, deserve to be, etc., are subjective perspectives. The central unsaid implication of that person's comments was savior. Jesus Christ has been written about as being a savior. Nelson Mandela has been written about as being the savior of the Azanian people, or so-called Black South Africans, in the face of apartheid. These are savior metaphors. And that is exactly how they see Donald Trump. And that's exactly how they always have seen Donald Trump. And as long as Donald Trump is straight up and knows what he's doing, and he's really good at it. So yes, of course, these people are looking at him that way. And it's to be expected. It's certainly what I expected. But he is considered a savior. And I think, I mean, of course, in the attempt to be logical and rational, we call it atrocious, we call it dangerous, but that's depending on who's looking. As far as a lot of people who want to keep control in this country who are white are concerned, they're in danger. And they need a soldier to get them out of danger. So they don't look at him as danger at all. They look at him as a persecuted savior, like Jesus. That's literally how some of them look at it. So it's interesting that this person, you know, that you put their quote up on the screen, because it's evidence of things I've been saying even back when I predicted he was going to be president. I don't know if you saw the show or not, but I was on television when Ben Carson was leading in the Republican polls. I said, "Don't trip. It's going to be Trump, and he's going to win," because these people in this society are very, very strategic, very focused, very vigilant, more than some of us. So the savior metaphor makes sense, and it's a powerful metaphor that will have powerful impact, because that's how he's seen. That MAGA hat, make America great again, means let's clear the air, clear the blackness, clear everybody else, and make white people the central theme of this country and the people who are in power, and let's sustain that. And this is the only person who acts in a way that gives us hope that we can finally get back on the right key here, that you and I see as dangerous. But again, that's subjective. Not everybody sees it that.
Absolutely. Conscious Thoughts, you posted, you said a lot to unpack. Brother, what is it going to take to wake Black people up? We've got books, we have movies to document the damage being done to us, and we still won't vote. I don't get it. Let me tell you what's going to take to wake Black people up. Pain and suffering. Let me tell you what's going to take. We've heard the good voices of some of the most brilliant and eloquent people have risen from Black America. That don't change our condition, right? You can talk about the great teachings of all of the great ones that have come before us. Those things don't change. We need pain. We need suffering. We need the fire under our asses in order for us to really understand what time it is in this country, Dr. Cleo.
But wait a minute.
Say it again.
But wait a minute. We already got the pain and the suffering. We already got that.
And guess what? And guess what? The pain and the suffering is going to either make or break us.
Man, when they murdered Michael, what's his last, the brother in
Ferguson?
Yes.
Michael Brown?
Michael Brown. I went to Ferguson, which, as you know, is majority Black. And to make a long story short, at some point while I was there, and I went there to do my own research on what happened. I went to where he was murdered in this street, this little small street that he got accused of jaywalking, so this white man could take control of him and eventually murder him. And I said to people with as much love and gentleness as I could, because I didn't want to be a jerk and arrogant and turn people off. I said to them, you're the majority here. You could have the kind of police chief and police force and civic system that you want. You're the majority. And what I found, and I'm abbreviating because of time, is that there's a number of us in this country who don't speak power, who don't speak the language of power, who don't have a psyche that's formulated to imagine and behaviorize the possibility of power. What we have imagined and behaviorized is of being submissive to whiteness. And real quick, because I know time is an issue, and if you ever see this film called A Girl Like Me, where this young sister reused the doll test to make a point, and some of those babies who chose a white doll, and there's a point in this that I hope is clear. Some of those babies in that film who chose a white doll, their parents gave them locks. Their parents clearly invested in them having some aesthetic pride. However, they weren't behavior scientists or self-conceptual health experts or people who understand how to master behavior change, or what I call breaking the trance and taking us out of the trauma trance. And if you aesthetically put on African garb or speak real well, or in the presence of one of these great speakers that you just talked about, and you're in a trance and you're not fully present, and you're also unconsciously somewhat resistant to the Black ingenuity of what's being said, because white people are saviors. And I don't mean just through the eyes of Jesus, but through on a structural level, we feel like it's better that they're in charge, because if we were in charge, this is what some of us think, it'd be a mess. I don't think that's true. I know that's not true. And they don't know history. They don't know about the examples of civic brilliance and commerce and building metropolis. They don't know. Trust me, I have a large staff of young people, and they don't know history. They don't know history. So the pain is there, but what's not there, brother, is the education and the trauma, the addressing of resolving trauma and anti-Blackness within Black people, and that's in this culture. I told you earlier about the brothers I ran into who were running behind Trump and who felt like Blackness was not getting them anywhere. Well, we need to have a conversation about that, because that's a very problematic perspective, because whiteness is not going to get them anything but exploited and used and become a puppet for that system and make them into decoys for white power, as opposed to people who are invested in the development of Black people and the establishment of Black power. We have to address that. But all this to say, it doesn't matter how great a speaker is if the person listening is in doubt about the value of Black people. And a lot of that is unconscious.
No, you're absolutely right. But I'm so happy that you made that point, Dr. Cleo, because that's going to take us into our next segment as we talk about our beloved and revered leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, and talking about the impact that he has made. But I thank you so much for your time with us, dear brother, as you talk to us about this historic moment that we're in with the indictment of Donald Trump. Dr. Cleo Manango of the Black Men Exchange. Brother, we got to bring you back on and definitely continue the conversation. Thank you, dear brother. Thank you, Doc. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for the invitation. Take care.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Family, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to hear from another great thinker. Dr. Gerald Horne is going to be joining us in a few moments as we continue to talk about what's going on with the indictment of Donald Trump. Expected to get some word from the district attorney, Mr. Alvin Bragg, and of course, open up the conversation to look at the future of Dr. King's America, how far we have gone and so far, and how much more we have to do before we take this thing to another space. So we'll continue the conversation now, bringing in our brother, Dr. King. Stay with us. A lot to talk about here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When you talk about Blackness, and what happens in black culture. We're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. I want to get some of your thoughts on this as we've been checking in and having this conversation about the indictment of Donald Trump, the former president. And many of you have been checking in. A lot of people are checking in today. So big shout out to my online culture crew. Big shout out to all of our new watchers here on the culture of the Black Star Network. And so many of you have had strong views about this situation. Many of you have already talked about the essence and the importance of voting. And if we are talking about that point of voting, folks, we do have to vote. I'm like Dr. Cleo. We should get out to vote. We should exercise that right. However, we can't vote and then sit on our hands and waiting on some mystery God to save us, waiting on some Superman, some magical person to come through and save us. I want to get to just a couple of the comments that I'm seeing right now. Truth is power, my guy. You said Dr. Cleo was saying that because of COVID is why we beat Donald Trump. Inviting is in office. Doesn't that make anyone feel more energized to organize, strategize, unite, do? It won't be close again. So to the point of truth is power, I know you was right in that, making a point that we shouldn't have to worry about some outside force to try to challenge a situation or to try to challenge an idea or try to challenge individuals who think like Donald Trump. I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. We do have to strategize. We do have to organize. We do have to unite to get to a point in this country. And I'm speaking of black folks, but I'm also speaking to white people. I'm also speaking to Latinos. Like at some point, folks, at some point, and remember yesterday I talked about this. I talked about, you know, making sure that as we have this conversation that we are very clear about what is right and what is wrong. But you also got to be very clear about good and evil, because that's the war that we are in today. Now, if you want to take it into a spiritual space, right? If you look at the scriptures, it talks about those, principalities and high places, the wickedness of certain principalities in high places. That's what we're looking at today, folks. Let's not be delusional about this whole situation. That what we're seeing is the embodiment of a certain mindset. And I'm talking about the embodiment of people. This ain't nothing fake. This ain't nothing, up in the sky or in the air. This is really happening on the ground. This is really happening in cities across this country where black folks, brown folks, where rights are being taken, where our human existence is being challenged each and every day. And if you think that in this day and time, that in America, that all will resolve, it will quote unquote work itself out without us becoming intimately involved in that process where it works itself out, then you are sadly mistaken. I'm going to say that one more time, folks. If you think that this situation, that this conundrum that this country is in, is going to quote unquote work itself out without you and me being intimately, actively, consciously involved, you are sadly mistaken. It doesn't work itself out. No movement, no change of any nation happens on its own. It always happens when the dissatisfied become so dissatisfied that they put something into action and essentially change comes into fruition. That's how it goes. No movement is happening by itself. The civil rights movement didn't happen by itself. The Black Power movement didn't happen by itself. The workers' rights movement didn't happen by itself. The women's rights movement didn't happen by itself. No movement, no change in this country happened on its own, or no change happened with people saying, it'll work itself out. It'll work itself out. They got it. No. Look, if they got it, guess what? Look at the condition. So you mean to tell me this is the current space that we're in this country? If they got it and we're in this condition, what does that say about them having it? It means that they have either lost it or they dropped it or they don't know what the hell to do with it. They don't got it. If you and I got it, then we have to step up to make sure that everybody understands the seriousness of this moment right now. That's the big thing. All right, let me go. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Karen Dorsey, you said he still will not do a day in jail. I think he's more embarrassed than anything. The look on his face said it all. That will be good enough for me. Well, you know what? I'm going to go back to the point that I made earlier, a couple of days ago. Keenan, let's throw those pictures up very quickly of Donald Trump in the courtroom. Look at the face. And we can, and to Karen's point, yeah, he looks a little bit, maybe he looks worried to some. Maybe he looks like the house of cards are falling down, all of those things. But the reality is, folks, he's still just one man who has an idea, who has been the embodiment of a larger idea, and an idea that has taken root in this country. So you do have crazy folks like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, or you have people like a Ron DeSantis, or you have people like Representative Santos, or you got people, all these people who are still carrying a part of that idea and running with it. If Donald Trump didn't lie, Representative Santos who lied about his resume, who lied about his schooling, probably wouldn't have run. But because Donald Trump lied and was accepted, look at Santos. He lied and was accepted. Y'all see what I'm getting at? So this is an idea that is so much bigger, that it's bigger than just one man. Now you got to figure out, how do we cut off the idea at its root? If we're talking about saving America, and I know some of us, to some black folks, that sounds like an oxymoron. That sounds idiotic. That sounds crazy. Why would we want to save America? Because it is America that we built. It is America that is soaked with our blood, sweat, and tears. It is America that our parents and our ancestors have fought for and died for. This is the country we were born in. So this is home. As wrecked and messed up as it may be, this is home. So we have a responsibility, a duty, to ensure that wherever our home is safe and sound, right? So for those of us that are looking to change the dynamics of power in this country, we have to do our part. We have to do our part. Look, I got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's hear from a few words from Mr. Alvin Bragg from the news from the district attorney and more. And of course, we'll continue the conversation with Dr. Gerald Horn. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We're going to jump right into hearing the remarks from the district attorney in New York, Mr. Alvin Bragg. Check this out.
By unlawful means, the $130,000 wire payment exceeded the federal campaign contribution cap, and the false statements in AMI's books violated New York law. That is why Mr. Trump made false statements about his payments to Mr. Cohen. He could not simply say that the payments were a reimbursement for Mr. Cohen's payments to Stormy Daniels. To do so, to make that true statement, would have been to admit a crime. So instead, Mr. Trump said that he was paying Mr. Cohen for fictitious legal services in 2017 to cover up actual crime committed the prior year. And in order to get Michael Cohen his money back, they planned one last false statement. In order to complete the scheme, they planned to mischaracterize the payments to Mr. Cohen as income to the New York State tax authorities. The conduct I just described and that which was charged by the grand jury is felony criminal conduct in New York State. True and accurate business records are important everywhere, to be sure. They are all the more important in Manhattan, the financial center of the world. That is why we have a history in the Manhattan DA's office of vigorously enforcing white-collar crime. My office, including the talented prosecutors you saw at arraignment earlier today, has charged hundreds of felony falsifying business records. This charge can be said is the bread and butter of our white-collar work. Fraud presents itself in all different forms here in Manhattan. We've charged falsifying business records for those who violated federal bank secrecy laws. We have charged falsifying business records for those who were seeking to cover up sex crimes. And we have brought this charge for those who committed tax violations. At its core, this case today is one with allegations like so many of our white-collar cases. Allegations that someone lied again and again to protect their interests and evade the laws to which we are all held accountable. As this office has done time and time again, we today uphold our solemn responsibility to ensure that everyone stands equal before the law. No amount of money and no amount of power changes that enduring American principle. I'll now take questions. We conducted a thorough and rigorous investigation, as we're known to do, at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I've been doing this for 24 years and am no stranger to rigorous, complex investigations. I bring cases when they're ready. Having now conducted a rigorous, thorough investigation, the case was ready to be brought, and it was brought.
Mr. Bragg, the indictment says that there were 34 false business records. And they were done to conceal another crime, but the indictment does not specifically say what those crimes were. We are assuming perhaps that they might be election related. I'm wondering if you can specify what laws were also relevant.
All right. So let me say as an initial matter that the indictment doesn't specify that because the law does not so require. In my remarks, I mentioned a couple of laws which I will highlight again now. The first is New York State election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. I further indicated a number of unlawful means, including more additional false statements, including statements that were planned to be made to tax authorities. I also noted the federal election law cap on contribution limits.
But why weren't there those crimes?
All right, that was just some remarks made by District Attorney Mr. Alvin Bragg, and I could not be happier to have this conversation about the next step and really the historic moment that we're in this country. We're seeing the indictment of Donald Trump on the same day, 55 years ago, where one of our beloved and great leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King, was assassinated, a man that stood against everything that Donald Trump stands for. And so I am happy to have my brother back with me today, my dear brother, Dr. Gerald Horn. Dr. Horn, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
It's all good, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Horn, some may know and the others may not know, but you actually have studied law. You are an attorney, so you understand the complexities of all of the language. Before we get into the conversation of Dr. King,
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been chatting. We're going to have a conversation with Dr. Gerald Horne, one of our great scholars here on the culture and on the Black Star Network. And we're so happy to have our brother in light of all that is happening today. So, Dr. Horne, can you hear me loud and clear, sir?
I can. Thank you.
Thank you, dear brother. Thank you. We played for folks just Mr. Alvin Bragg, the district attorney for the city of Manhattan, for the city of New York and Manhattan, and just kind of laying out some of the things as to the thinking behind moving forward and indicting Donald Trump. And this indictment obviously shows about the hush money that was given to Michael Cohen to be given to the porn star. But then it also came out that this indictment, those 34 federal felony counts, also included his involvement in what they call illegal conspiracy around undermining the 2016 election. So it sounds like, Dr. Horne, that these indictments are very broad, that they aren't just about, his falsifying business records. It's even going into, his involvement with the election situation. And it may open up the door again for what happened on January the 6th. So what's your take from Mr. Bragg and how he has laid out the case? Does this sound like something that is going to lead to any form of imprisonment for the former president?
Oh, it very well could. I think Mr. Bragg made clear that in Manhattan, one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, that the bread and butter of the prosecutor's office is prosecuting those who submit falsified business records. They do that regularly, scores of cases, hundreds of cases. What gives this particular case a certain gravity is that the falsified business records were in aid of a scheme to get Mr. Trump elected, insofar as it was felt in 2016 that if the electorate, speaking broadly, had known about his assassinations with Stormy Daniels, and that apparently $130,000 had been paid to her, that they would be inclined not to vote for him. And so it's not only falsified business records, it's also conspiracy, insofar as there are more than one person, 2 or more persons involved in agreement to commit an illegal act, the other person, of course, being the erstwhile attorney, Michael Cohen. Keep in mind as well that even if by some stroke of fate, Mr. Trump is able to beat this case, warming up in the bullpen are federal cases. You mentioned the January 6th insurrection.
Right.
Is being investigated by a special prosecutor. The Mar-a-Lago documents case, recall that Mr. Trump purloined documents from the leaders of North Korea, intelligence documents about French President Macron, etc., would not return them to the National Archives. And then there's the case out of Atlanta involving Fonnie Willis, a Black woman who happens to be the daughter of a founder of the LA Black Panther Party, speaking of John Floyd. She's investigating these very curious phone calls that Mr. Trump made in the immediate aftermath of the November 2020 election, where he was trying to encourage an official in Georgia to find 12,000 votes to tip the election in that state to him. So Mr. Trump has a number of very perilous cases confronting him. But what should be concerning to us all is that it's not clear if this will alienate his base. It's not even clear if he could be defeated for office if he was campaigning from jail. So this is the country in which we live now.
So I got a couple of points to kind of speak to as I'm hearing you, Doc. One is, even though the Constitution does not say any or does not mention any indictment from barring someone from running from office, at this point, because of the historic nature of what we're seeing now, will there be can Congress possibly say, hey, that automatically disqualifies him from running for office, even though the Constitution does not explicitly say that?
That would be difficult. I mean, what possibly could happen as part of a plea bargain, I'm sure you're familiar with a plea bargain where the prosecution threatens you with 30 years, and as a result of a bargain, you say, I won't go to trial, I'll only take 5 years. Perhaps there can be a plea bargain whereby Mr. Trump says, I will not run for office if you allow me to escape prison. But keep in mind as well that if by some stroke of fate, Mr. Trump is elected from a prison cell, there is the 25th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which says that if the president is incapable of executing the duties of office, he can be removed. But keep in mind as well that there have been 2 previous attempts to impeach and remove Mr. Trump during his first term, 2017 to 2021, and both failed. And it's going to be very difficult for any Republican to vote against the interests of Mr. Trump. That's why he's been able to raise millions of dollars since this indictment was since it was revealed. That's why Governor DeSantis, his main competitor, the challenger from Florida, his poll numbers have been sinking like a stone in light of the fact that the base is rallying to Mr. Trump. You see that most of the leading Republicans, with the curious exception of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, have rallied to Mr. Trump. Also, the curious omission of Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas, who just threw his hat into the ring and asked Mr. Trump not to run. But otherwise, they're all rallying around Mr. Trump. So we live in a very dangerous country right now.
This is very dangerous. And I thought it was also interesting. I was reading some reports, Doc, that it said that some of his opponents on the campaign trail had decided to kind of stand in solidarity with him, right, which I think is very interesting. I mean, if nothing else, this is the party that is supposed to be of family values. And here is a man that is going on trial for paying hush money to a porn star for a sexual encounter while he's married. But you want to rally around him? And I'm trying to understand, Dr. Horn, you study history, you are much more proficient in understanding this. And I'm really trying to wrap my mind around the fact of how do you reconcile this? Because this is almost like, it's like we're in a surreal reality, a Twilight Zone, a Black Mirror episode, when you see something so blatant and obvious, but somebody else is trying to convince you that what you're seeing that is blatant and obvious is not blatant and obvious. And they're trying to use all of their resources. They're trying to use their money. They're trying to use their charm to get you to see, no, it's no problem here. Paying hush money, undermining an election, a national election, falsifying business records. No, that's not what you're really seeing. What you're seeing is a businessman that's being persecuted because he wants to go against the system. Like I'm saying, I'm not trying to make light of it. It's just the fact that there is something inherently disturbing about that, to the point where it's an insult to the American people. And the sad part about it is that some of the American people don't even know that they're being insulted.
Well, to quote the late comic Richard Pryor, the Trump base is turning to us and saying, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Well, I think that's obviously an indication of the kind of hypocrisy that they're trying to get us to swallow. That is to say, family values are for you and for me, but not for them. And then, as you know, if you begin to press these folks, they'll come up with some sort of biblical argument. They'll quote some figure from the Bible, who engaged in multiple transgressions, but somehow didn't wind up going to jail, was considered to be, quote, saintly, unquote. But obviously what we need to realize is that what's driving the Trump base is not necessarily mores or morals. What's driving them is a lust for power and a thirst for power. Ultimately, I'm afraid to say that even though Governor DeSantis and even some of our liberal colleagues are trying to teach our children a very sanitized version of U.S. history, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you really want to go back to the founding principles of this country, you go back to the question of mass enslavement of the Africans, indigenous dispossession, and the so-called American dream, as it has been termed. It basically involved Europeans, oftentimes with next to nothing in their pocket, crossing the Atlantic and getting rich with a little bit of luck and a lot of pluck on the dispossession of the indigenous and the enslavement of the Africans. And so when they tell us that they want to go back to founding principles, you should not necessarily think about hallowed principles like freedom of speech and trial by jury of one's peers. You should think, in fact, of our ancestors who were unpaid and worked for next to nothing. And ultimately, I think it's fair to say that the Trump base, when they talk about returning to the glory days, making America great again, well, what made this country great, as you indicated in your comments a moment ago, at least what helped to build this country, because it's questionable if you can ever say it was great, was the unpaid labor of our ancestors. Right. And so they're sending us a message, and we better listen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, Dr. Horn, this is all happening on the 55th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I wanted to just bring that part into the conversation, because what Dr. King stood for and his vision for this country and currently where we are two different visions. And I'm wondering, Dr. Horn, is there a way to bring these two Americas together? Can we bridge the gap between Dr. King's America and the America that we're living in? Folks, we want to continue the conversation. I'm going to get to some of your comments from our crew, and stay with us as we talk to Dr. Gerald Horn here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shots.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking to Dr. Gerald Horne, one of our great scholars here on the culture, as he gives us his insights about the indictment of former President Donald Trump. Big historic day in New York City and around the country, as this day has prompted many people to wonder where we're going in this America. That a former president who has violated the law, who has committed egregious acts on so many levels, is still able to run for office, is still able to raise money, is still able to control the conversation and be the leading contender for the president of the United States. Take a look at the video, folks. This is President Trump, or this is Donald Trump. And Keenan, throw some, if we can show that picture. There you go. That's him in court. That's him in court right there, folks. This was from earlier today. He didn't say a word. Sitting in court as 34 counts have been charged against him. Counts that include falsifying business records, making a that hush payment to his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, ahead of the 2016 election, to his involvement or what they call illegal conspiracy in undermining the national election for 2020. I want to bring Dr. Gerald Horne back into the frame because Dr. Horne, 55 years ago today, sir, was the assassination of a man who this country still, I think we still are challenged by understanding of who he is, what he brought to the table, and laying out a blueprint for a new America. And we don't have enough time to go over all of the things that Dr. King stood for today, obviously. But I did want to just raise a couple of things. One of the big things that I think that we can see, and your remarks earlier, you talked about this lust and thirst for power, which is why so many Trump supporters stand with President Trump in spite of his indiscretions, in spite of his corruption, in spite of all of that. That there's this thirst and lust for power. And what I'm seeing is that there's a system that has created this culture, the system of capitalism, that has essentially created this culture where you got to get yours, I got to get mine. The almighty dollar becomes the almighty God. And essentially a system that don't see people as human beings, but a means to an end. And so one of the big things that Dr. King often advocated for, and he was criticized for, as you know, was this idea of being a socialist. And he talked about this. I want to throw this quote up very quickly, Keenan, if we could, bro. Look at what Dr. King said when it was brought to the table about his view of socialism. Dr. King was a philosopher, but he was also a man that understood what good government looked like. He said, Martin Luther King Jr., this is coming out of Jacobin.com, where he refused to repudiate Marxism wholesale and now well established, with historians pointing out his deep-rooted concern for economic structural inequality. King did not shy away from speaking his mind within his closest circle. While quarreling with civil rights leader Andrew Young's centrism, he alleged, quote, "You're a capitalist and I'm not." According to King biographer David Garrow, while talking to his friends in the 1960s, the preacher admitted that economically speaking, he considered himself what he termed a Marxist, largely because he believed with increasing strength that American society needed a radical redistribution of wealth and economic power to achieve even a rough form of social justice. He understood, Dr. Horne, and I'm sure you have done research on this, that there needed to be a fundamental change in the structure of this country, in the governance of this country, in how we view each other in this country to bring some level of equality, which essentially will bring some balance and peace of mind to its citizens. But what do you make of that?
Well, obviously, Dr. King was on the money when he was speaking of structural inequality. To give
all
you
puns intended, right? He was on the money.
Absolutely. You know, to cite one example amongst many, just recently I was spending time doing research in San Francisco, which has a Black population probably less than 5% right now. But if you go into downtown San Francisco, overwhelmingly and disproportionately, the homeless, the unhoused population are Black men of a certain age. When you see such a spectacle, you can come to a couple of conclusions. Many of our conservative fellow citizens, they say that there's something wrong with these Black people since they're disproportionately unhoused in the city of San Francisco. Or you can say there's something wrong with this system. Perhaps this is a legacy of slavery, this Black unhoused population. Perhaps this is a legacy of Jim Crow, U.S. apartheid, which was the close cousin of slavery. And so if you want to really get to the root of this dilemma, as Dr. King was saying, you have to fundamentally challenge capitalism. And Dr. King did this, you may recall, in the early 1960s, that then U.S. President John Kennedy and his brother, the Attorney General Robert Kennedy, they took Dr. King into the Rose Garden of the White House because they were trying to have a private conversation, and they thought that the Oval Office might be bugged by J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, who was a notorious racist and enemy and antagonist of Dr. King. And what they wanted to tell Dr. King was that he had to get rid of those who were socialists and socialist-minded who were around him. Dr. King agreed on the surface to do so, but he continued to have underground connections and contact with these individuals, which then caused J. Edgar Hoover to charge that Dr. King was the most notorious liar in the United States of America. And then you may recall sending him and his wife, Coretta Scott King, certain tapes that he said he was going to reveal to the public that he said would expose Dr. King not only as a liar, but as a man without morals. He thought that would lead to Dr. King committing suicide. This was the kind of scrutiny that he was under. And I think that the final point that I would make is that after Dr. King was assassinated, April 4th, 1968, a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, Louis Stokes, convened a congressional committee to investigate the assassination not only of Dr. King, but of also President Kennedy. And he came to the conclusion that both were likely killed as a result of a conspiracy. So when historians have added meat to those bones, and it would be folly for us to think, as the King family argued subsequently, that James Earl Ray, the man who was fingered as the assassin in Memphis, Tennessee, acted alone. That would not shed light on how he was able to escape Memphis, to get to Canada, to get across the Atlantic to Portugal, was en route to Southern Africa, perhaps seeking sanctuary in a white minority regime there before he was captured. This assassination of Dr. King still needs to be investigated 55 years later.
And very quickly, it requires us to have a different conversation about this idea of socialism, because this may be the thing that puts Black folks and Black America in a different space, where our relationship to this country and our history to this country as being once going from being products of this country to constituents of this country, it speaks volumes about our mindset of why it's important for us to have a conversation about a different form of economic structure, and a different form of government that's rooted in people and not profits.
Absolutely. Let's go back to that homeless population I was talking about in San Francisco. A different kind of government and a different kind of society would make sure that these people were able to secure housing.
Mm-hmm.
If you cross the border into Canada, you have a different kind of healthcare system where if you get sick, you don't necessarily have to sell an arm or a leg or your house in order to hire a doctor. The government pays for your healthcare. I have a friend in Canada who was hospitalized for months. He said that when he left the hospital, the bill was $7. That is the kind of society you have in Canada, which is a socialist-oriented society, which is not unlike the societies you have in Scandinavia. It's not unlike what you're trying to construct in South Africa as we speak. So certainly we need to have that conversation, but I'm afraid to say that as long as you have, to come full circle back to where we began, as long as you have 75 million people voting for a corrupt criminal in November 2020, I would understand if some in your audience would think that it would be a pipe dream to have a conversation at this particular moment about socialism, although I do think we need to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here's another part of the conversation I want us to bring up, which is this idea of riots. And Dr. King has famously said that riot is the language of the unheard. I want to put this second quote up. This is coming from workers.org, and we're going to put this quote up very quickly as we close out this discussion. But take a look at what they posted. They said, no matter how the bourgeoisie press, take a look at this, and Keenan, we can throw this up there. It says, no matter how the bourgeoisie press will distort the real character of the events following the assassination of Dr. King, there are two fundamental aspects of these events which cannot be obscured by mere propaganda. The first one is that the uprisings were not an accidental character or solely a protest at the murder of Dr. King, but were a general expression of the revolutionary momentum inherent in the liberation struggle. The King assassination crystallized and accelerated the tempo of the rebellions. The second aspect of the rebellion is the implicit rejection of the theory of nonviolence as a method of achieving liberation. The ruling class could scarcely fail to notice this. So if we're looking at this language of the unheard, and Dr. King saying that, he's saying the riot is the language of the unheard, but he also said that it could be very destructive to the systems and to the people. If you want you to hear the full quote, he said this in a 60 Minutes interview with Mike Wallace back in 1966. But when we look at where we are in this country, where we are seeing what we're seeing in front of that New York City courthouse this morning, right? Not a riot, protest, but do we need to start to think about taking a different form of action to get our voice heard? Do we need to take a different form of action? There needs to be something. What is going to be the crystallizing, as that moment was in 1968, the crystallizing of a different caliber that's going to cause us to really come together to understand that at the end of the day, enough is enough. We need something better. Liberation needs to happen here in America. How does that happen, Doc?
It's going to be an uphill climb. When Dr. King makes that statement about these revolts, oftentimes called riots, were the language of the unheard, he was making a direct reference to something I wrote a book about, the Watts Revolt of August 1965 in today's Los Angeles. And keep in mind as well that when people surged into the streets, the immediate trigger was police terror. But what helped to propel them was the unemployment, the rising prices, poor mass transit, etc. What will it take to help us to climb out of this hole in which we find ourselves? It's going to take struggle, but also it's going to take the kinds of steps you've seen in the state of Michigan of late, where they've made it easier to organize unions. One of the most powerful weapons of people in the working class, and most Black people are part of the working class, be they employed or unemployed, is our ability to organize unions. Sadly and tragically, federal legislation in Washington, D.C. has not been passed along that lines. But if we can pass the kind of legislation just initiated in Lansing, Michigan, and supplement that with similar legislation in Sacramento, California, and lo and behold, Austin, Texas, the shining buckle on the Sun Belt as well, I think we'll be headed in the right direction.
There it is. There it is. Dr. Gerald Horne, who is one of our great contributors and scholars from the University of Houston. I appreciate you so much, Dr. Horne, for taking time out your busy schedule to be with me this afternoon to talk to us on this historic day. I thank you and look forward to reconnecting with you very soon, God willing.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the conversation that we just had with Dr. Horne, Dr. Cleo Monago, and so many of you have been checking in. I truly, truly appreciate it. And folks, we're going to certainly keep our eyes posted on what's going on with President Trump, and more importantly, the impact. Now we're going to see what the impact will be. Make sure you stay tuned to us here on the Black Star Network. Go to our website today, blackstarnetwork.com. Show your support. If you enjoyed the conversation that we had today, today is the day that you help us continue the momentum that we're moving on, which is to create a digital media space for Black conversations, for Black interests, and essentially for Black people in this country. So go to blackstarnetwork.com and make sure that you give money, share the content, and follow us on social media at Black Star Network on Instagram and Twitter. You can also follow me at Farajii, the real Farajii, the real Farajii on Instagram, as well as Farajii on Twitter, and I love to connect with you. Look, stay tuned. Up next, Roland Martin Unfiltered at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My brother is going to continue the conversation about Donald Trump and so much more. So stay tuned for that. And I appreciate my online culture crew for holding it down as always, as you do. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As always, remember this, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we will talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Have a great and peaceful afternoon and evening. Peace.